It's time for some Hawthorne trivia. You may not know it, but you live in a town that has countless interesting stories filled with important people, places, and events. Today, we are going to learn about some places that you probably have seen that have a very important place in history. In fact, some of you may pass these spots every day on your way to school. In order to understand some more, we have to go way back in time, all the way back to the time of the American Revolution, about 250 years ago. Most of you will probably know the basics of the American Revolution. It was when the American colonies revolted against the British Empire. The result was the founding of the greatest country in the world, the United States of America. Let's take a look at a famous painting from that time. Do you know who the man on the left is? Anyone want to guess? That's right. It's George Washington, the man who led the colonial army against the British and would go on to be elected the first president of the United States. Now, do you know who the man Washington is talking to in the painting? This guy right here. It's okay if you don't know. That's a famous French general, the Marquis de Lafayette. Does that name sound familiar? It should. We have a street in Hawthorne named after him, Lafayette Ave. Lafayette was a good friend to Washington and all Americans. And in addition to honoring General Lafayette by naming a street after him, we also have a plaque in Hawthorne. Have any of you seen this plaque before? I bet some of you have, but maybe didn't take the time to read it. It says, site of the John George Ryerson House, built about 1740. The Light Infantry Corps, commanded by General Lafayette, was encamped in this vicinity, October through November 1780, placed in 1952 by the Passaic County Parks Commission. Does that ring a bell? Nope. Okay, let's have another hint. Do you recognize the area where this plaque is now? Maybe some of you realize or see the baseball fields off in the distance. It's in Gofflebrook Park at the top of a big hill where many kids go sleigh riding when it snows. But way back in 1780, there was a house on the hill owned by a man named John George Ryerson. He was on the side of the Americans during the war and let Lafayette's troops camp on his property. The house burned down in 1950, but the plaque was put there to commemorate Mr. Ryerson's patriotism. Isn't that amazing? Now, let's talk about one more interesting fact about Hawthorne. Do any of you recognize this building? Some of you may pass it on your way to school. It is a restaurant called Batagra, but in the year 1780, it was a house. This is where General Lafayette set up camp while his soldiers stayed on the hill in Gofflebrook Park. The house was owned by a man named John Francis Ryerson. He was the cousin of John George Ryerson. And even though their names were similar and they were related, they were on opposite sides of the war. You see, John Francis Ryerson supported the British during the Revolutionary War, while his cousin supported the Americans. But that is a story for another edition of Hawthorne Trivia. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about our awesome little town. And maybe the next time you see a plaque or an old building, you will take a little time to read about it or ask some questions. If you do, you may just discover a little Hawthorne trivia on your own. See you next time, and thanks for listening.